Okay, so what we were just talking about was sort of these different angles that maybe HEMA practitioners come from versus someone who's studying a tradition that's more battlefield focused. And I think as I was hearing it as a HEMA person, one thing that I, might be a little bit of a source of anxiety would be like, oh, well, all of these sort of battlefield considerations are these things where all of a sudden I need like a completely new skill set. And is that what you found, that experience you were describing with your teacher? Yeah.
Interestingly, it's quite the opposite.
Good.
It's like
awesome.
The movements are, there are different fundamentals, don't get me wrong, but superficially at least, they share a lot of commonalities.
Yeah.
Where the divergence happens.
Oh God, drive faster. Yeah, where the divergence happens.
Yeah, so where the divergence occurs is really in what we call like the entries. So in Shastar Vidya, because it's a constantly moving art from the basics at least. You've got dueling at the other end, but at the basic level, it's you're essentially running into battle lines.
Yep.
It's far more like sport in that.
God, this is amazing. Continue. Go on. This is.
Oh, look at my face.
Sorry. What the? Is it a pipe?
It's the pipe. Yeah, it's the pipe. There's a pipe. A pipe up there.
Anyway.
So we go back.
Yeah.
So yeah, where the divergence really occurs is when it starts getting into entries and how you cross that sort of threshold.
What the? It's spurting. Whatever. Anyway, so I think we're just gonna have to
just gonna have to power through. If it happens, I'll try and power through.
Yeah. I mean, dude, the outtakes gonna be good.
Make sure you get the bells palsy. So where the divergence really occurs is in what we call entries, in that there is various methods of getting past the combat threshold. Yeah. Because it's not just about hitting the guy, which is almost always considered secondary to Shastar Vidya. Right. It's about, can I influence his position? Can I get him to stumble back? Can I create an opportunity? Or can I just push him out the way because there's going to be 400 of us?
Can I just re-emphasize something you said that I really like? Hitting the guy is secondary, right? Yes. Which is very counterintuitive to say modern HEMA tournament, where the goal is hit them.
Well, what my teacher likes to emphasize is that you got to remember that firstly, you're going to be doing a lot of running. It's going to be tiring. Yeah. There's going to be sighting issues and stuff. You might be fighting towards the sun. There might be a lot of things going on. Yeah. The ability to pull off a perfect hit that is worth it is going to be difficult in a lot of scenarios until you get to a certain level of skill, essentially. So it's you've got a window. If someone's jogging, I think the window ends up being 0.2 of a second or something like that, where you're in the ideal sort of swing spot. Yeah. After that point, you're not really going to be able to finish your strike properly. So it just doesn't make sense in Shastar Vidya to teach someone that just has to survive and just has to protect the line and just has to, do the job, do the drill, to focus so heavily on striking. Yeah. And because of that, you get this evolution of combat that, as I say, shares similarities with all combat in a lot of ways, especially at the higher level where things start to, these elements come into it a bit more. But the evolution path itself changes the entries quite significantly. HEMA is still quite staccato in a lot of ways. It's still quite weapon first, whereas Shastar Vidya is very much body first, weapons secondary, techniques somewhere down there as well. But really, knock the guy out the way, kill him quick, keep going kind of thing. So and I think that's one of the main principles, one hit, one kill.
Yeah. So I'd love to dig into this a little bit, right? So can you be a little bit more specific maybe on, goals, right? So rather than trying to make some sort of perfect lethal hit, things that are also pretty high on the priority list, if not higher, are things like positioning. Yep. And that can be one person against another person, or it could be a unit against a unit. What about things like retreats? Can you talk about as a unit, what would you be considering in terms of this is the mission you're trying to accomplish?
So Shastar Vidya has multiple levels. You've got the village level where you're not be expected to do much complex stuff and you're just gonna have clubs and shields and basic weapons. Then you've got slightly better, you might have some axes and some spears. Similar, they're going to be tight formation, so that's going to be its own thing. Then you have skirmishing, which is like the third sort of traditional style.
Yeah.
And it essentially becomes a game of hit and run, but you work in small groups, and it's very timing based. So I almost liken it to, I guess, airfield combat or something like that, you know, like where there are windows of opportunity to attack, and there's windows where you can't attack, and you use the retreat and surging perfectly timed. You know, you train it with each other.
Super cool.
So the minute I get in, and I know, and you know that I'm in range because we've done this a million times, and I pause for a split second, and I draw their attention. You're going to dart through this way. You're going to go around that way. And when you run it like a football drill, if you like, it can be very, very effective. And we've done one of these at skirmish one year, and we've done like 3 versus 5, 3 versus 6, and the 6 were surprised how easy it was for them to get circled when you just say, okay, put the weapons aside for a sec, just use them to defend yourself. The main objective is, can you rout them? Can you get them to start like jostling and go, shit, what's happening kind of thing? And again, that is where Shastar Vidya really starts coming into the its own.
Super cool.
Because then it affects the body mechanics, it affects how you move, it affects the posture, and everything builds on this fundamental thing that doing this and getting a strike is totally secondary to moving kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh my God, so many questions. So keeping along this vein, one immediate question, I think you kind of were starting to talk about this, like other reference points that are maybe useful for people to use as metaphors for the Shastar Vidya stuff. Are there either specific games that you guys already do that are pretty transferable to HEMA or whatever, and actually, are there other existing sports that are good models for thinking about what the dynamics are?
My teacher often describes Shastar Vidya as the sort of swimming in gravity, in that you're constantly moving and you're pausing and ebbing and flowing, and you're using that timing far more than you think. It's far more timing than it is footwork, so to speak.
Okay.
And I like to liken that in my head to things like basketball or football, where if you've played these games, it's not about being ultra explosive. It's about moving at a certain speed, like easing off the gas a touch so that person gets 3 or 4 inches ahead. Then they've opened the angle, then you start moving again. And when you now put a weapon behind it and you say, look, I'm not even going to swing at you. I'm just going to threaten you and make sure you can't get a clean hit on me. Again, you've got like a divergence in what we call like entries. In that you've got entries that are designed to cutting, entries that are designed to circle, entries that are designed to like draw you out, and then before like you rush in, and then you've got multiple people doing entries. So that's where it really they blend together, in that HEMA can use this stuff, but they don't nearly as much kind of thing, because they kind of focus
and again,
on the weapons.
I feel like that's just, it's not that, like HEMA techniques are not useful here. I think it's just we haven't necessarily tuned them to these kind of mission parameters, if you will. Do you feel like you would be able to, and I may be giving things away for IGX Fall, but like, do you feel like you would be able to give almost like a list of like, here are some different kinds of missions that you might, goals that you're trying to do, and these are like some training drills or games that we could play to get you to be able to execute this and to also understand what the failure is like when you're not doing it correctly?
Yes. So one of the big failures that I see, not just in HEMA, but in all kinds of combat striking sports, especially if they've never fought a grappler or like someone that's just going to charge you and like slam you to the ground, is sacrificing posture for an attack, and not just posture, but angular advantage. And that if 2 people are moving at each other, even if they're the same mass, same structure, and all of this kind of stuff, but one guy's got a slightly better angle. Firstly, there's going to be a psychological pressure in that, almost like herding, where you can feel like, oh, when you make contact, I'm not quite in the right place. And secondly, there's going to be like, when we stop, if I push you, are you going to be able to hold that ground, even in this perfect scenario where I've let you get there? And there are tons of little saunchies we used to do back in the day. And just to be clear, these are like village games that are, just basic stuff that they teach you before you actually get into the real. And
I love that. I love that it's as simple as a village game. Basically.
Yeah, this is it. And these are the stuff that my teacher has said, multiple times, that you take it across any sort of martial art, it's going to have applicability, because it's not about techniques per se. It's more about, do you understand timing? Do you understand surging? Do you understand pressure angles are one of the ones that are a little bit more difficult to get an understanding for, especially if you're used to tit for tat. But it's essentially if someone's coming at you at an angle where the line of attack is just crossing your wrist, it can feel very different to someone crossing, 4 centimeters down.
Right.
Because now you're cut suddenly like this, and how do you adjust to this sort of position when you've got a split second kind of thing?
So you've explained this to me before, and I remember the first time you explained it. To me, it felt very much like, oh, that's just application of centerline. Is there a fair amount of, how would you say, like, what is the connection between what we think of as like Wing Chun centerline sort of theory versus this?
So Wing Chun centerline is, it's just the centerline pretty much. Yeah. And Shastar Vidya has that as well, but it becomes obscured in that I can strike perfectly fine at any angle that I like once you understand structures and once you understand just, basic momentum-based weapons. You don't necessarily have to be perfectly aligned to strike. Right.
Absolutely.
So what you have is the basic center line, the heart line, if you like, but then you also have channels of attack. So let's say you've got a weapon in your left hand, and my job is just to stop you from using that weapon. There's no point in me lining up to your head. I'll line up all my attacks to your hand, and I'll move around that. And then can I line them to the shoulder? What does it look like if I say, look, I'm going to start facing this way, and I'm going to want you to attack me starting here? How do I adjust, and how do I keep fighting from this angle without giving away my position while someone else is fighting me facing that way? And then it becomes very much a sensitivity thing. And again, these are really applicable across the board in that if you just get them in as just games, it just changes your heuristics and almost your operating system around combat.
Absolutely. So no promises depending on how things work out this year, but what is the intention hopefully for some of these games to be things that you could actually do as a workshop at IGX Fall? So
if I do go to IGX, this would definitely be something I'd like to see. And I'd like to see how HEMA expresses this stuff, because they've got their own quirks, especially with their own armors and their own explosivities and all of this kind of stuff. Because although Shastar Vidya has a very deep culture, it is just one lens. There are other lenses. It'll be interesting to see. The cross evolution, if you like. See what happens.
I think once you start mixing different like data sets and knowledge bases, you always get interesting interconnections, interaction between areas of knowledge that, the great thing about that is like, then you get more questions, but at least you know what the questions are that are interesting to really start focusing on, so we can actually get to some.
And also even just answers. More fundamentally, just, I think all data is good data. And it's like, I don't have this thing where I'm like, I will not explore this at all because it's, I don't know, against my code or anything. In terms of combat, and I want to see it all. I just want to see what happens. Like what happens if you throw in a grappler with one of these dudes, and what happens when you see a rapier? I mean, I think the first time I tried HEMA, the rapier really threw me off, man, because we've got such an aggressive pushing in fighting style. Someone very like backing off and like poking at you. It was difficult to like wrap my head around for a second.
I think, you know what? Let's pause there for a second. That would be another great thing that I actually want to dig into in terms of, again, you've got a number of different tactics that you already have in terms of like retreating and all these things. But now I want to sort of maybe talk about some specific tactics you see in HEMA all the time. And I'm curious to see sort of like your perspective. So we'll talk about that next.
Cool.